So my goal, kind of going back to the title and how can you get kids to that level, it's really, my goal is to keep it really simple, funny, and to use your terminology, to dadsplain how it all works.
You're tuned in to Dadsplaining, a weekly chronicle of all the weirdest, messiest, grossest, and funniest parts of fatherhood, hosted by two first-time dads. I'm Jesse.
And I'm Brandon.
And this week, we have a very special interview for you guys. We are going to be talking with author JJ Wenrich. He has written a book called Teaching Your Kids to Buy Stocks, or I think just Teaching Kids to Buy Stocks. We're going to get into a lot of interesting financial topics, which we have never covered here on Dadsplaining. So I'm really excited about it. But before we get into it, Brandon, if our listeners want to get in touch with us, where can they find us?
Please give us a like or a follow on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Dadsplaining Podcast. You can check out our Facebook live stream every week from our page there. And then we are working actively to get something similar set up on Twitter, so stay tuned for that as well. You want to reach us directly, do it at dadsplainingpodcast@gmail.com. And then you can check out this episode and every episode every week anywhere you get your podcasts.
All right, so we are on the line with JJ Wenrich. JJ, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. How's it going?
We're doing great. Thanks for asking. Thanks for coming on with us. So we found JJ actually through his wife, Jody, who also runs her own brand, I believe called the Salty Christian Company, which is a really fun Instagram account if you guys want to look that up. Jody reached out to us and having listened to the podcast, thought that JJ's book would be a good fit, and we looked into it, and it really is a great fit because this is something that we've never covered on this podcast before. Obviously, our kids are not yet 2 years old, so they're maybe a little young to kind of learn about money. But as you might find out in this episode, you're never really too young. So, JJ, my first question for you before we get into the book is just tell us a little bit about your family.
Happy to. And thanks so much for having me. And I always look good when Jody's the first people that folks come across. She definitely makes me look good. So, I really appreciate being on the air. Jody and I have 3 kids together. They are now 12, 13, and 14. Mm-hmm. And she and I have been together for 18 years. And Alex is 28, and she had Alex when she and I met. And so that's been our family portfolio, as we like to call it. But Jody and I met as young financial advisors. I was right out of school. She's 6 years older than me, and we built our own practice together, helping families with their finances, with investing. I was a bit of a market geek coming out of college. I'd gotten into it at a pretty young age. And as life rolled forward and we started having babies, we started talking to them about money and business and things, not much older than yours are now. I don't know that we were dropping knowledge to them at 2, but we were definitely starting to talk to them about things by 3 and 4. And my career went a different path. Her career went a different path. She decided to start staying home with the kids as we had 3 babies in 30 months. And mine led me to the road where I started talking to other financial advisors every day as my clients. And what you saw was the idea for all of this really came from my personal life with my kids and my professional life crossing streams. As I started talking to them about money and eventually the markets, I started telling those stories to other financial professionals. And the stories caught on both with the kids. They started to learn some things. And other financial professionals started to hear how I was doing things with my kids, playing some different games, and that they were learning a lot. And so, both stories caught on. And a long story short, I decided to put some of the ideas together, and originally wanted it to be a curriculum, but it turned into a book. And that's where we are today. Yeah.
That's awesome. So let's dig into some of those lessons. So you said age 3, 4, 5 is when you started talking to your kids about money. What concepts are you introducing to them at that stage?
Yeah, at that age, you're really just talking to them that money is a thing, and where it would start. I mean, you really want them to be aware. And if they wanted something, you start to introduce the concept, well, we have to pay for that. Mm-hmm. And it costs a certain amount. And it probably started with just counting and learning numbers. But over time, we were really intentional about having conversations about what we were doing. if we were in a store or a restaurant, we would talk about, this is a business and we're going to pay this much for our dinner or for your toy. And so we just try to keep it relative to their world and talk to them about money and business. And over time, that conversation evolved into some deeper things. Mm-hmm. But it really starts at a young age of just talking to your kids about money.
That's really cool. So I mentioned that my son is about 22 months old, and when we take him into the grocery store, there are, here where we are in the South in the United States, there are Kroger grocery stores, and other stores do this too, but they have free fruit stands for kids where you can pick up a fruit and give it to the kid, and then they can eat it as you're browsing and shopping. The concept that he has not nailed yet at this age is that you can't do that with everything in the store. So if we pick up a bunch of bananas or one of his snacks, he doesn't really understand yet that you can't open that until we've paid for it. So I've said to him in very simple terms, no, we have to give the store the money and leave before we can eat that. I don't think he's getting that yet, but that's kind of the direction I want to move into with him. So JJ, on to the title of your book, Teaching Kids to Buy Stocks. I thought that was really intriguing when I heard that because I don't know much about stocks, but this is something that you are confident that kids can kind of grasp at that age. So on the topic of stocks, kind of at what age do you start talking to kids about this, and where does it start?
I have to give you the second half of the title to really there's a bit of a hook with that title because people see that, oh, wow, teaching kids to buy stocks. Uh-huh. The second half of the title is stories and lessons for grown-ups. Uh-huh. And so, yeah, it's like, oh, I thought I could just give this to the kids and they would make me rich and then it would be all over.
Child labor.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, I'm asking you all to read it. But no, it really depends on the child, and I'm not suggesting that we're going to have a bunch of 5-year-olds that are waking up early to actually draw the charts that are on the front of the book or anything, but it's more of helping folks like you, the parents, the moms, the dads, realize that a lot of these things that sound really complicated aren't as complicated as financial people make them. Mm-hmm. Whatever profession you're in, you're going to speak your own language with your colleagues and with other professionals. But when you try to take that language out to the real world, people don't listen to you. And the problem with financial literacy is, that's language that we all really need to speak. And I don't feel like the message is always getting through as clearly as it could.
I see.
And so my goal, kind of going back to the title and how can you get kids to that level, it's really, my goal is to keep it really simple, funny, and to use your terminology to dadsplain how it all works. Yeah. And depending on your kids, it depends on the conversation. The way we would start is going back to talking to them about money is eventually you have a conversation about these businesses that you're transacting with. Whenever you're spending money, there's probably a business associated with it. And you have to say anything to kids 100 times before they're going to hear it. And so you just keep saying it over and over. Eventually you get to the point where you explain some of these companies are quite large. Some of them are quite small. And at some point you have a conversation about public versus private. Uh-huh. And that's when you start to get a little bit into the weeds, but some companies are publicly traded and some are not. And whenever you feel like they can understand that, you start to explain that to them, and then you do it again 100 more times. And when they're publicly traded, it's probably something more that they're more likely to have heard of, and you start to have the conversation that means there's a stock associated with it.
Wow. Okay. So your kids at the age that they're at now, sort of the tween-teen stage, that's something that they're grasping pretty well, do you think?
Yeah, by now they've grasped it really well. I think they understood the concept of public versus private probably by, 6, 7, 8, 5, 6, 7.
Wow. I know I didn't.
They understand it a lot deeper now than they did then, but they start to recognize brands, and that's what you do is you keep it relative to their world. If they're, I saw the kids and their cousins sitting on Apple devices. Well, you explain, that's a company.
Yep. Or Disney, all the kid shows. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect example. Yep.
Okay.
but yeah, you just kind of show them, yes, some of these are publicly traded. What does that mean? It means there's a stock, and that stock is going to move around a lot.
Now, how do I get them to understand that all the different services are doing their own streaming thing now, and it's going to degrade my value of my Netflix subscription to the point where I've got to have 18 different single subscriptions to Disney and Hulu and ESPN and all these other things? How do I stop the madness?
Why is it so expensive to cut the cord?
Exactly.
Yeah, right?
It was supposed to be cutting, right? But now I'm
That's
like
adding.
enriching the cord without having it. Yeah.
No, not the way I thought it was going to go.
Yeah, exactly. So JJ, what kind of responses have you gotten so far from sharing this book with parents? Is it something that they're responding positively to?
Yeah, it's been really great, and it's come from a few different demographics, if you will. The moms and dads a lot of them really have wanted to hand it to their kids, and so they maybe haven't read it as much as they should have. But what we found is that the teens that they've handed it to have really enjoyed the book, even though the stories are definitely written from a parent's point of view. Teens have liked it. The 20-somethings without kids that still have time to read, they've liked it. And then I'm in my 40s. Probably the two most interesting responses I've gotten have been from my dad and my father-in-law. So the other side of the spectrum where they have time to read would be our parents. But my dad, he told me I think I'm going to open up a brokerage account. And so I guess that's a win. After 20 years in the investment business, I convinced my dad to open up a brokerage account. That only took 20 years.
Right.
My favorite response was my father-in-law. I love him to death, but he's probably said 500 words to me in my 18 years with his daughter.
We know the type.
So typical father-in-law. And he took the book to the library in the town he lives in and also to his financial advisor and said, you guys need to buy this book for the library, and you need to buy this book for your clients, and you need to read this book. So I felt like, well, hey,
wow,
even my father-in-law approved.
Great. Yeah, I would definitely say this book should be right up the alley of the people who are Jesse and I's age, in the late 20s, but, even a few years ago, because I'll say that, I didn't know much of anything about financial literacy because you don't really learn about it so much. There's not a great way to learn about it. So a book like this would have been an obvious solution or a great idea of something to have in front of people at that kind of young age where you've got your first job and you're starting to build up to thinking about first car, first house, all those kinds of things. You need money. You need capital. You need some substantial money. And more than just the money and the amount, you need the flexibility and the freedom and the comfort to be able to make big decisions.
Oh, yeah.
So something I'll just say that my wife and I did was, several years ago when we were very early on in our lives and we, were getting married and then kind of merging together, we were thinking, okay, we need to go get a broker and work with some kind of a company to help us out. And we basically went in there and we're like, listen, we don't know what we're doing, but we just know that people who are older, who haven't ever come in and haven't ever gotten financial help always say, man, I wish I'd done it when I was in my 20s. And so we literally said, can you tell us what to do? Because we're in our 20s, so that when we're in our 30s, 40s, and 50s, we can look back and be like, oh, good, we didn't miss the boat. We actually did it right.
Exactly. I don't know if this is specific to our generation or if this is just something that hits people as they reach this stage in their life. But, my dad taught me, he helped me open my first savings account and my first checking account, when I reached about 15, 16. And he kind of taught me the basics, but none of that is taught in schools these days.
Yeah.
And personally, I reached adulthood, getting my first full-time job without a full understanding of what a 401k was, how insurance works, what the heck a deductible is, So you, JJ, you might be speaking to a generation that is not as financially literate maybe as a generation before them, or certainly not as much as they should be. So I love the fact that this book is it's easily digestible, not just by parents, but also adults, like you said, who maybe don't have kids yet, certainly by teenagers. I think that's really cool that teenagers are able to pick up this book and get the concepts and enjoy it as a read. And then older adults too, like you said. I think that you're kind of hitting multiple demographics here who are on all different points in that spectrum of knowing what to do with money. So tell us, for our listeners who are interested in this book, where can they find it?
You can find the book wherever you buy books online, at Amazon or Barnes & Noble, any other retailers like that, and hardback and ebook as well. And then we have a website, teachingkidstobuystocks.com, that has links to all those places, but also has quite a bit of other stuff that we are putting together to just support financial literacy. Like a lot of things, when you start to look for something, you find a lot of it, and there's a lot of great folks doing stuff with financial literacy, and there's a lot of good curriculum for kids when they're really young to teach them about money, and we try to lift those folks up and share it on our website and in our social media.
Fantastic. And for our listeners, we're going to post links to those, to all of that in our show notes as well, and we'll post a link on our social media pages. So JJ, before we let you go today, I had a couple questions for you, just speaking as a parent. We have a lot of listeners who are in the earliest phases of parenthood, who are maybe either expecting their first child or are raising babies and infants and are in that stage. What advice would you give to new parents? Like, what is the one piece of advice that you would want to let every new parent to know?
It's really hard because, like my kids, I like all my advice equally. Maybe that's not completely true. But I'd say there's two ways I'll take that. One is just dad to dad, and one is more financial related. Dad to dad, it'd be, as much as possible, don't worry, be happy.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
There's a million things to stress out about, and we could do 100 shows about that.
Mm-hmm.
But most of them are, when you look back on your life and when your kids are teenagers, you'll look back at how stressful it was when they were little, and you'll think, gosh, I wished I'd have just chilled out a little bit. At least maybe that's just me.
No, that's great. That's great for us where we are.
Yeah, it's easy to stress out, and figuring out ways to not is the best advice I could possibly give. And then on the financial side, it's talk to your kids about money. Mm-hmm. And just as early as you can, do the things we've talked about today. And if you can, do what you did, and that's start saving early and talk to somebody about how to do that. So I tried to sneak three pieces into one there. But that's what I would say.
That's great. And then the last question I'll have for you is, it's A or B. Either A, what was the best advice that you got as a parent, or B, what is something that you wish someone had told you at any point in your parenting, struggles and strifes?
I'd say the best advice I got, and I don't remember who gave it to me, but I remember using it, is to play with your kids. And as much as you can, set everything else aside and play with your kids when you get the chance, and have fun with them and be a kid with them. Because if you ask your kids what they want, that's what they want.
I love that. That's great. We actually just wrapped up an episode about different toys that toddlers are playing with at different phases, and a lot of those are interactive with parents and kids. That's one thing that we're about here at Dadsplaining, is getting dads especially more involved with their kids, whatever phase of life that they're in, and play is such a great way to do that. So that's really awesome advice. So JJ, before we let you go, is there anything else that you would like our listeners to know?
Yeah, I guess maybe the last comment I would say is, it can be intimidating to think about talking to your kids about money, and especially if you don't feel like you know it yourself. And what I would suggest is, you have the skills with whatever you have. You're worthy of having a conversation. Just get started and see where it leads you. If you don't feel like you don't know everything, that's fine. None of us do. Just talk about what you do know, and that will get the ball rolling.
I love it.
Great.
Yeah, I love it. All right. So I think that's a great place to wrap it up. So once again, guys, this is JJ Wenrich, author of Teaching Kids to Buy Stocks. That's teachingkidstobuystocks.com. Great place to get started learning all about this stuff. JJ, it was a pleasure having you on, man. We look forward to reading the book ourselves and staying in touch and seeing where this takes you. So thanks for coming on with us today.
Hey, thanks, guys, so much. Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks, JJ.
All right, guys, so that'll do it for this week's episode of Dadsplaining. Thanks for sticking along with us. This was a really fun interview. I hope that you guys had some great takeaways from it. Like I said, be sure to check out the show notes for more information on teaching kids to buy stocks. So, Brandon, if our listeners have questions about this episode or any others, or just want to chat with us, where can they find us?
Please give us a like or a follow on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Dadsplaining Podcast. You can follow our Facebook live streams every week. We're working to get the same thing set up on Twitter, so check that out very soon. And then you can drop a line to us at dadsplainingpodcast@gmail.com. And then this and every episode are going to be available wherever you get your podcasts.
That's right. And don't be afraid to reach out to us, to send us a message. I mean, we are replying weekly to direct messages on our Facebook page, on Instagram, on Twitter. We've also got a parenting group, Dadsplaining, a fatherhood group. Of course, as always, moms are welcome there as well. Great place to swap tips, ask questions, and just chat with other like-minded parents. So, Brandon, what are we talking about next week?
Next week, we're going to talk about books. So we just recently talked about toys and what our kids are interested in. We're going to talk about the different books that they're reading, what they're liking, what they're not liking, what we're not liking, and just kind of delve all into all things literacy.
Awesome. So until next time, I'm Jesse.
And I'm Brandon.
And hey, Brandon, how do you make a waterbed bouncier?
You bounce on it?
No, you add some spring water.
Oh.
That joke comes courtesy of reddit.com/r/daddjokes. Oh,
I've got one for you.
Hit me.
What do sprinters eat before a race?
I don't know.
Nothing. They fast. Got him.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. We'll catch you next time. If you're enjoying Dadsplaining, you might enjoy this other podcast from our friends here at WSB Radio.
Like current events and want to be the smartest among your friends? Then the Power Pod is the show for you.
The Power Pod is a weekly recap show where we cover the current events of the week.
It's a show where we're not afraid to get serious.
And we're not afraid to have some fun.
So try us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, the WSB Radio app, WSBRadio.com, Stitcher, CastBox. Okay. Anywhere there are podcasts, we are there. So power up with the Power Pod.